Dixon, he's my brother. Do you know where he is now?
There's an island fortress on the Normandy coast. Hurry up.
In the previous episode, Carol finally got word on Daryl's whereabouts, and at the same time, she realized she was deep within enemy territory. She must find Nest before Genet does if she's to have any chance of rescuing Daryl. 10 minutes later, Carol seized her chance, knocked out the guard, and carefully set down the wrench. She then took the gun from the unconscious guard. Now, all she needed was a vehicle to make a quick escape from this place. However, the cars next to her were all locked, and she couldn't find the car keys for a while. Just then, Carol saw a few warhorses not far away, and she was slightly relieved. This was undoubtedly a convenient means of transportation. The approach of strangers made the horses a little frightened, and Carol could only find a way to calm them down first. Carol took a nervous step back, afraid the horses' neighing might alert nearby soldiers. Luckily, the horse quickly calmed down. She hurriedly secured the gun onto the horse's back, then moved to the front to untie the rope, and with one swift motion, swung herself up onto the saddle. She looked around nervously and just happened to notice that the guard on the ground had woken up. This was bad. Carol spurred the horse forward, racing towards the gate. Before long, the guard would raise the alarm and soldiers would come after her. If she acted fast, she had just enough time to escape, but Carol pulled on the reins and quickly analyzed the situation before her. These soldiers were clearly lying in wait, as if they knew someone would show up. Carol realized that she had been betrayed. Sabine watched her with a smug smile. It seemed Carol was in real trouble this time. In his office, Remy closed his eyes in shame as he heard the door open behind him. Carol walked in, unsurprised to see it was Remy who had betrayed her. Genet watched Carol intently, curious to see how she would react to this betrayal by a friend. But to her surprise, Carol remained calm, as though nothing had happened. Disappointment was evident on Carol's face.
This is the only way we could think of to save Julien. I'm sure you would have done the same for your Daryl, no?
She could understand Remy's desperation to save his husband, but she could never forgive his betrayal. Genet broke the silence, stating that she would arrange treatment for Julien's lung disease and provide a stable home in Paris for Remy and Julien. For Remy and Julien, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Though they sacrificed a friend, their future was now secure. Carol stayed silent, observing carefully, knowing that the real mastermind hadn't yet revealed her true intentions. As if reading Carol's thoughts, Genet said with her back turned,
Our two guerriers right outside. Might as well sit down.
The warning in Genet's words was unmistakable, so Carol had no choice but to comply. Moving to sit at the table, Genet slowly poured 2 glasses of red wine, then walked over to the table, set them down, and sat beside Carol. Carol was momentarily uncertain of Genet's intentions. From her prior observations, she knew that traitors were always harshly punished.
Or I can have you signed to the atelier. I believe you have witnessed some of our research tests.
Carol was taken aback. If Genet had seen through her and still let her live, it could only mean that Genet thought she still had some use. So, Carol continued the conversation along that line. To her surprise, Genet candidly revealed that the lab was developing a drug aimed at controlling zombies for combat, a strategy to reduce soldier casualties and aid in world peace. Carol nodded in understanding. So this was the real purpose behind the zombie army project, using force to counter force. Seeing how quickly Carol understood, Genet decided to be direct, instructing Carol to honestly explain how she ended up here. Carol felt a hint of frustration. She had never encountered an opponent who matched her so evenly.
I landed 2 days ago from America.
Really?
I manipulated an innocent man into letting me fly in his plane under the false pretense of looking for my daughter. We had to stop in Greenland, where he was almost used as a sperm donor, and I was nearly murdered by insane environmentalists.
Carol turned her head away. She had expected that anyone hearing such an outlandish story would react just like this. Genet continued her questioning.
And why do you want to find Dixon?
I came here to kill him.
Must have done something terrible to you.
Carol gave no answer, which was as good as admitting to it. This made Genet unexpectedly self-conscious, and she even offered Carol a few words of encouragement, saying that persistence would eventually bring its rewards. Seeing Genet's sudden shift in attitude, Carol responded,
You can't imagine what I have done to get this far.
I understand, I do.
Carol put on an expression of empathy. knowing this would likely elicit sympathy from her counterpart. But Genet seemed unfazed by this, and instead urged Carol to pull herself together, to turn her past hardships into motivation. Seeing that Genet's reaction was not at all what she expected, Carol raised her glass, saying she'd give it a try. Genet played along, taking a sip of wine before standing up and speaking.
I believe you've helped us locate the headquarters, the island fortress in Normandy that my former comrade told you about. I'll organize a convoy in the morning. You want to kill Dixon yourself? I will take you to him.
Carol's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected Genet to be this astute. She couldn't help but worry about how much of her half-truths Genet had managed to piece together. The next day, Genet didn't hurry to set off. Instead, she directed the convoy to detour near the Louvre and stop there once again. She had intentionally brought Carol here to revisit their first conversation about the famous paintings housed within the Louvre. Genet had originally been just an ordinary cleaner, spending her nights alone tidying the galleries, with only the paintings on the walls as her companions. Initially, she couldn't understand why artists always seemed to create works centered on images of death or suffering. It wasn't until the arrival of the zombies, when she and others narrowly survived but were trapped in the museum for a week, that she gradually began to understand the meaning within those paintings. After facing so many trials of human nature, all those apocalyptic scenes were emphasizing the chaos and destruction brought on by humanity itself, while imagining an all-powerful force that could save people from catastrophe. But reality, she realized, was often harsh. Prayers alone could not bring change. Humans had to stand up and clean up the mess themselves. Carol understood Genet's point. Under such circumstances, someone indeed had to step forward to help people regain hope, so that order could eventually be restored. But the post-apocalyptic world also required new adaptive rules, and former religious doctrines were impractical, more likely to become tools for those with ulterior motives to control the masses. Genet smiled, pleased, indicating her approval. She knew Carol would understand her perspective. Carol made no comment, knowing that in a world like this, everyone held their own survival beliefs. She had seen plenty of people with such extreme views and could only acknowledge that, while the intentions were good, the methods were far too radical. Back in the present, the sound of the prison door opening in Nest broke the silence, and Daryl was crushed to see who had entered. Isabelle had also been captured, and she appeared badly injured. Daryl was eager to ask what had happened, but Isabelle simply told him not to worry before being dragged into the adjacent cell next to him. The guard escorting Isabelle takes a chain and shackles her to the water pipe as well. Once the guard had left, Daryl asked Isabelle what had happened. Isabelle explained that they had split up during their escape attempt. Fallow and Laurent found an opportunity to escape, but she was forced to hide in the passage beneath the city wall and was soon caught by a patrol. At that moment, Isabelle caught sight of a cockroach scuttling out from a drain. She slowly extended her foot, managing to pry up the drain cover and held it in her hand, keeping it ready for later use. Daryl leaned against the cold wall, advising Isabelle to conserve her strength, saying they would escape tomorrow, but neither of them could sleep, knowing that Nest would not let them off easily and that tomorrow would surely bring another brutal fight.
Tell me a story.
About what?
Just want to hear your voice.
We can do whatever you want. We can sleep late, take long walks, watch the sun go down by the river.
That sounds like a dream.
Daryl nodded and continued to imagine their future lives. Isabelle struggled to move over to the wall and reached her hand out toward Daryl in the adjacent cell. Daryl quickly took it, despite the wall between them. In this moment, their hearts were closer than ever. What this ill-fated couple didn't know was that tonight was bound to be a sleepless night. Meanwhile, 2 kilometers away along the beach, a convoy rumbled forward, heading for the castle. Carol felt a wave of anxiety. She was close to finding Daryl, but Genet seemed to be growing suspicious of her and might very well force her and Daryl into a deadly showdown. She had to come up with a plan before she was completely cornered. 10 minutes later, the convoy came to a halt 500 meters from the castle. Genet thought this distance ideal for pre-battle preparations, but Sabine worried that rushing in might undermine the element of surprise they hoped to achieve. Genet, however, firmly countered, saying that war is always sudden, and they only needed to make sure their warriors were ready for action. Carol looked ahead and saw a crowd disembarking from the convoy's rear. From their attire, they appeared to be ordinary civilians. Meanwhile, on Genet's side, she was shaking hands one by one with her fully armed soldiers. Something didn't feel quite right. Meanwhile, Losang entered the prison with 2 guards. He wasn't about to give Daryl and Isabelle a chance to recover and planned to interrogate Isabelle again. Isabelle responded with silence. Seeing her unyielding attitude, Lo Sung thought for a moment, then ordered his men to take Isabelle away. Daryl's anxiety mounted, fearing they intended to torture Isabelle again, and he shouted, demanding to know where they were taking her. Without turning, Lo Sung coldly replied that Isabelle would eventually see reason.
Isabelle has always had an open mind and heart. You sadly are beyond hope.
Daryl was confident that Isabelle would never choose betrayal, but he still wanted to divert Lo Sung's attention in hopes of at least easing some of the pressure on Isabelle. At the same time, outside the castle on the tidal flats, Genet's forces were gathering in full. Standing at the center, she gave a loud speech, praising everyone present as fearless warriors, offering her deepest gratitude and respect. Carol couldn't understand the speech, so she stayed alert, scanning her surroundings. Just then, she spotted Dr. Lafleur preparing a concoction nearby and instantly realized Genet's plan. However, the other civilians hadn't noticed anything unusual. They simply thought this was a risky battle. They firmly believed that, no matter the outcome, their sacrifice would secure a better future, so they trusted Genet's words without question. By this time, Dr. Lafleur had prepared a specialized weapon. Seeing this, Carol stepped out from the crowd, unable to stand by while these innocent people met a tragic fate. Carol was shoved back into the crowd by two soldiers, and in that moment, she realized that Genet hadn't regarded her any differently. Genet had only created an illusion of equality, making Carol mistakenly believe she might survive until the end. Nearby, a group of soldiers pushed a cannon into position, likely preparing to clear the path for those following behind. Sensing danger, Carol hid behind a large man. At Genet's command, the tarp on the truck ahead was thrown open, revealing a machine gun aimed directly at them, and suddenly, the soldiers turned against the civilians. In an instant, panic swept through the crowd. They couldn't understand why Genet would do this, but defenseless, they had no way to resist. Seconds later, everyone lay on the ground, but Carol had anticipated this and immediately followed the large man down. The gunfire ceased, and Dr. Lafleur quickly instructed the soldiers to move forward. They had to inject every body with a strengthening serum before they turned into zombies. Carol quietly reached for the needle, and with the smallest movement, she pulled it out. The serum would have injected automatically. She was skirting the very edge of death in a desperate bid for survival. Soon, all the bodies had been injected, and Dr. Lafleur's team retreated. The soldiers all raised their machine guns, staying on high alert as they expanded the perimeter. They had all witnessed the deadly power of the rabid zombies firsthand. Just then, an all-terrain vehicle approached from the rear, with a man tied to its frame. Genet, satisfied with her strategy, knew there was no one better suited to serve as bait than Cadron. This was her method of punishing traitors. Carol observed everything unfolding in front of her, stunned to see that even this man had met such an end. Cadron understood his fate as well, and he accepted it with a calm resignation. Suddenly, the bodies around Carol began to convulse, transforming into rabid zombies under the serum's influence, and she dared not move a muscle, forced to watch helplessly as it all unfolded. Struggling against the all-terrain vehicle's frame, Cadron wasn't afraid of death. He was furious at such a humiliating way to die. Just as Carol was about to get up and blend into the zombie horde, a few zombies in front suddenly turned toward her. She had still been discovered by the zombies. Without a second thought, Carol broke into a sprint, narrowly dodging their attacks.
Get us out of here!
Carol quickly dashed to the ATV, then hit the accelerator and sped off. With hordes of zombies roaring as they chased after her, Cadron had survived by sheer luck, but he still felt a chill run down his spine. With the horde so close behind, his life was entirely in Carol's hands. Unfamiliar with the area, Carol had no choice but to follow the single road leading toward the castle. The road wasn't long, but for Carol and Cadron on the all-terrain vehicle, every second felt like torture. Ahead was Nest's gate, but it was obvious they wouldn't be let in. Carol glanced back, seeing the zombies closing in fast. Instinctively, she sped up, but just as they neared the gate, she abruptly slammed on the brakes.
What are you doing? Why are you stopping? They're coming! They're coming!
Carol wasn't waiting for death, but rather waiting for Genet's elite squad to act. They would only fire the cannon when the zombies reached the castle gate, clearing the path for the convoy. shielding herself from the blast's impact. Carol looked back and saw the zombies mere feet away. Cadron, terrified, shouted for her to speed up, and she slammed on the gas, racing toward the gate.